the Shrewd Dudes podcast, we're going to talk about a few different things. First of all, we're going to talk about some natural disasters that have, taken our world by storm, but also some nice redemptive stories, which, you definitely want to hear about. In American news, Tyree Irving, or Tyree
Nichols.
Nichols, thank you. Tyree Nichols, I didn't remember his name. Again, we're going to cover the fallout from that and some of the nonsense that's come out of that. We're going to follow up with Joe Biden and his reign of, stupidity. And then we're going to also talk about some problems in the electoral process in Arizona. You're going to want to, find out about that. In Canadian news, we're going to talk about Edmonton. Do they have something up their sleeve? Possibly, And also the federal government is doing some very shady things. And we have a very big breaking news story about Justin Trudeau that you're not going to want to miss. All of that and so much more on today's show, the Shrewd Dudes Podcast.
Alrighty, so we are back for another Tuesday News Day after another weekend of glad tidings and great joy.
Always the optimist over there.
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
No,
It's always the pessimist.
always the pessimist.
He needs senior sweetness to bring him back to the ground.
Yeah, sometimes.
From the fires of Mordor.
But
But
before we jump into the stories of Tuesday News Day, did you have an interesting weekend, Daniel?
I had a very interesting day, actually.
Yeah.
So what happened was I woke up today, and my boss sent me the money that I earned from the last paycheck. This was the biggest paycheck I think I've ever had. Over $3,000
Nice.
and pay for like a 15-minute period. I was like, wow, that is a seriously good paycheck. But on the exact same day that I got that, I also got another email from my landlord saying that I am basically out on my butt after June 1st.
Oh,
She's evicting all of us.
whoa.
We don't know why. She may just be like done with renting. Maybe she's selling the house. Who knows what? But come June 1st, all of us are going to have to find a new place to live.
Crazy.
Which was big news. I was like, dang. That's
Yeah, especially considering, well, at least it's not until June, but still,
Yeah.
the current market is nuts.
I know. And so I'm going to have to find a place in the new market. So we'll see what happens there. So crazy day today.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Sure. Going to be a vagabond in come summer. I'm going to be a free agent. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, like my coworker and I were talking about him potentially moving out into a new place, and he's just like, yeah, we've been looking at places. Like a 2-bedroom is like $1,500, and I'm like, yeah,
it is bad.
Nuts.
It is bad out there.
I'm like, I was so glad that our landlord has only said that he's going to be raising the rent by $100.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes from $1,350 to $1,450, and I'm like, $1,450 for our place is like, yes.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. My place is it's a fairly amazing deal as far as like rental places.
Mm-hmm.
I only pay about $500 for rent and then utilities.
Oh, like each of you.
Well, we all have different amounts based on the size of our room.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because it's individually per room.
Yes, each room has a different price.
Okay, so I thought it was like I thought you were the one who was kind of like, and then subletting.
No, that would be Dan. Dan's the one that kind of runs all the finances, and we all pay him. Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be crazy, man.
That is kind of crazy.
Might have to downsize a lot, which sucks.
Yeah. That'll.
Right now I have a garage, which is a humongous blessing.
Oh, it is.
Now it's going to be like, okay, well, what kind of stuff do I have to get rid of or put into storage? So we'll see. That's going to be my life for the next couple of months. But what about you? How are you doing?
Well, aside from having to drive over and drop him some stuff at my parents tonight after the show. That's going to kind of suck.
First world problems.
I know.
But be glad that you could do that.
I am excited. I am excited for Sunday.
Yeah.
New D&D campaign. Been something I've been looking forward to for a while because the last one stretched on and on and on.
Forever.
And I finally finished it, and my players were like, "Is this legal?" And I'm like, "Not technically, but it sounded cool, and it wasn't going to utterly annihilate you." And so they're like, I'm like, at the start of Sunday session, I'm like, "Yes." So before you guys could start your turn, suddenly comes flying through the wall these like enhanced pieces of armor, and they attach to the vampire. And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "It sort of looks like that scene in Iron Man 3 when he has all the individual pieces of armor come and attach to him, and then he slams against the ground. And there's this electric shockwave that comes out from the armor." And the guy's like, "What? He has Iron Man armor now?" And I'm like, "Yes, magical Iron Man armor."
Little overpowered.
Well, it only buffed him a little bit, but if I had actually taken... Because the armor was its own monster. And if I had thrown the armor as its own monster at them, they would have struggled a lot. Probably died.
Yeah.
And
everyone listening to this entire, wonderful explanation is like going, "Nerd!"
Nerd, 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 nerd.
You gotta own it.
So yeah, my coworkers are supposed to be playing with me in this new game, as is Chad. Love Chad. And it should be a ton of fun. All of my games are very, very humorous. I even threw like a nod to the last campaign, because Chad's like, "I speak to the people and I tell them that I have defeated the evil vampire lord." I'm like, and in the horizon you see this like red Zeppelin machine, which was from the other campaign, which is like this thing that he hated. And he's like, "No, we shoot arrows at it and kill it, knock it out of the sky." I'm like, wow, that's harsh.
That is pretty harsh.
So
it's exciting new times for you.
It is exciting new times. And
we should talk about the exciting times that this lady in Hawaii had. Which,
yes,
I saw this today and I was like, "Dang."
Okay.
So why do we live somewhere where the
air hurts our face?
This is one of the reasons right here.
One of the reasons. Boom.
Wham!
Now at 11, dramatic video capturing a huge boulder crashing right through a home in Hawaii, narrowly missing the homeowner
huge.
inside. The roughly 5 by 5 foot rock plowed through the wall of the Honolulu home Saturday night, then hit the family's car, a glass door, and another wall before it landed in the bedroom.
In the bedroom.
Wow.
In the bedroom.
That is nutty.
Isn't that crazy?
That is nutty.
Being home one day and suddenly
then
a
crash.
gigantic,
Yeah.
I think the only thing comparable to that is when you see like those gigantic tree trunks that break off a tree and just smash through the roof.
Well,
of the
like
house.
I remember like one of the biggest surprises that I had. This was like years and years ago. I was working for Enterprise, and the traffic lights were malfunctioning, or like there was a power outage, so all the traffic lights were out. And when the traffic lights go out, what do you do, Danny?
You basically treat every intersection like a four-way stop.
Exactly. Which 95% of people were doing. One lady decided, I shouldn't have to wait. So she hops into a lane that doesn't exist and decides to gun it.
Wow.
And so she's gunning it. The road is like 50K. She's going like 95, 100. And I'm just like sitting here waiting. And then all I see is this car fly out, and the truck in front of me T-bones it like crazy.
Wow.
And just caves it in. And everybody else is like, wow! Because like he smacked her, so like her car spun around like 3 times in the middle of the intersection. And we're all like, hokey Dinah.
That'd be a lesson to you, kids.
And oh yeah, the guy in the truck was just like he was in shock.
Well, he didn't know what hit him, probably.
Yeah. And like the lady couldn't get out.
She was stuck in there?
She was stuck in her car. They had to get the jaws of life to open her Hyundai Veloster up.
Yeah. See, this is why, kids. You always look both ways before crossing
Crossing
the
the road. You might get hit by a Hyundai Veloster.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely think about that. So,
Yeah.
but unfortunately,
But speaking-
that was not the
well, no.
only. That was not the only like natural disaster that
Yeah.
hit the ice or hit the streets this
Yeah.
this past week.
I was going to say, speaking of things crashing and burning,
That also works.
let's watch the world's first ever transgender figure skater suffering an epic fall in awkward performance at opening ceremony of the European Figure Skating Championships in Finland.
What are the
So-
rules? Are we allowed to laugh? Are we allowed to laugh?
Heck yes.
ajatuksen lähteä toteuttamaan lapsuuden haaveita ja alkaa luistella
Oh,
naismallissa.
there
Yeah.
this person goes. There he goes. There he goes.
Ja
Oh, one glide, barely holding on.
aikaa, eli
Oh, he
siihen
can do it.
9
He
vuoteen
can do it.
sisältyy
Hold
aika
it.
paljon. Eli
Hold
kun lähdetään
it.
ihan nollasta, niin ihan jo sitä, että pysyy pystyssä kahdella
Oh,
And,
he pulled a turn.
uskaltamaan tehdä jotakin siellä jäällä.
and down.
And then, oh, it's all over.
And
The best part is he can't get back up.
cannot get back up.
That was the big thing because I'm like,
On ollut, mutta tietysti korona
I know how to like stand up.
Oh,
on
it's
ice.
easy. It's not
It is
too
not
difficult.
hard. The fact that he's having a tough time is like a whole
And
lot.
requires an actual woman to help him up.
Of course. This is just wonderful sadness. If you
Yeah.
actually go down, like they actually have a picture of this old man.
Oh,
At
yeah.
the very bottom with this little tutu. Like, look at the tutu right there. The tutu.
Ah.
Yep. By the way, kids, that is a man in a dress.
Yeah.
That is
Ugh.
a man. Yep. Like, to be fair, if you look at that face is fine as long as it's a male face.
As long as it's a man. Then it's like,
In the
okay,
man
you have
face, you're, like,
aged.
totally normal. Yeah.
But
totally
it's
normal
like,
face
no,
for a
I
man.
am a man trying to pretend to be a pretty woman.
Yes.
Reminds me, of course, well, of course, like the other thing in this vein that happened over the weekend was Dylan Mulvaney having
Yeah.
his face restructured and feminized.
Yep.
Still sounds like the same creep. But yeah, that guy's messed up.
To be fair, though, Dylan Mulvaney is, before the transition, he already looked like the prototypical, like, soy boy.
Yep.
He was already, like, completely and totally, like, basically a, like, like, probably wore skinny jeans and, like, tight
Yep.
top. And I'm like, you already look like, like an effeminized man. So, like, the idea that now, I get why they're doing this, because Dylan wants to avoid people mistaking him for a man, because part of the whole thing with being a transgender is you have to maintain the illusion at all times
Yeah.
for your mental health. Hence, this is why a lot of them go through these crazy amounts of like, these crazy amounts of, like, last resorts to try to make that happen, because they need that delusion to maintain. They can't have anyone breaking it. Which is why they go through all these, like, crazy last
Yeah.
resorts.
But someone who did not have to go through crazy last minute resorts, but did have to jump through a lot of hurdles and eventually did not end up competing last year.
It was clunky, but
It was clunky, yeah. Was Novak Djokovic.
Yay, Djokovic.
So Bill Gates watches as unvaccinated Djokovic completes historic win. Last year, Serbian superstar Novak Djokovic was deported by the Australian government as a danger to public health and deemed likely to inspire civil unrest by his mere presence. This year, he proved them all wrong, winning his 22nd Grand Slam with vaccination fanatic Bill Gates in attendance. So this is just a clip of him winning, which I'm going to mute in case we get censored.
Goes in. Nice shot. Little backhand.
Boom, and the other side,
back.
and easy win.
Boom!
Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh. Too far, it's all over. That's a pretty good game, actually.
I beat you.
That's right. To be fair, like, so a lot of people talked about it way back when he was going through that battle with Australia.
Yeah.
Djokovic right now is, I think, the best player in the world.
Oh, yeah, by
Like,
far.
for a long time, it was like Federer, and it was there's another guy too.
Nadal.
Rafael Nadal. So those are the top players. But now that
Now
they're
it's
gone,
like he has
Djokovic
dethroned
is
them.
the guy. Yeah, Djokovic is the man. And the reason why this is so satisfying is because back then, like 2022, everyone knew this was a complete joke. The guy had no symptoms. The guy he posed no risk. But of course, the Australian government had to completely and totally maintain the complete lie and the facade of like those unvaccinated people are super dangerous. This is exactly like that transgender ice skater and Dylan Mulvaney. They have to maintain the illusion. They have to maintain it at all costs, lest people might wake up to the utter insanity. Djokovic going back and pretty much getting his payback and actually winning is a sweet ending to this whole saga, because let's face it, for a very long time, all of us were basically, especially during the COVID era, all of us were pretty much faced with the prospect of what's going to happen to us if we if we say no, because for a lot of us we're like, okay, there's all sorts of possibilities during it. Now, almost I rarely, if ever, find an unvaccinated person that regrets it. Rarely. Like I don't think I've even ever met one. Whereas I see innumerable number of people who were jabbed who regretted horribly. So it's good to see that somebody actually demonstrated that to everyone how to do it properly. So good on Djokovic. I'm really happy that he got this. He definitely deserves it. He's a great player. And it's a happy ending to that story.
Happy ending, happy feeling. But the next story is not a happy feeling, and it's not a happy ending.
Okay, a little better. Yeah, let's go.
So let's talk about Tyree Nichols. So over the weekend, on Friday night, there was a footage released of the Memphis police beating a man named Tyree Nichols.
Yep.
Now, the story, as far as most people know, is that the Memphis police pulled over Tyree Nichols. The reason why they pulled him over, still unknown.
Well, supposedly
they claimed it was dangerous driving,
or reckless driving, or something like that.
Yeah, and
that was
the claim. That was the stated reason. But unfortunately, now that they've seen the video, the police reports and the video contradict each other, so we can't take what they're saying at face value.
No, but it's looking like, okay, so we have the body cam footage, but you also have a security camera footage from close by.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what's going on right now is there is a narrative that they're trying to construct that's kind of blowing up in their faces. The narrative is a black man gets assaulted and by police and dies in custody, but all 5 police officers are black. Okay? So for anyone who's in the BLM, cult, bubble, you're like, okay, what do you do? Because it's not an obvious case of a white officer, killing a black man. This is black officers. That didn't stop the goons from the mainstream media from basically trying to argue that this is still white supremacy. I'm like, oh, you bunch of bunk.
Utter turds. Utter turds.
Mm-hmm.
But after this occurred, and after the footage was released and the officers were arrested and charged, the Memphis police has decided to disband the unit that fatally beat him. So the Memphis police chief disbanded the city's so-called Scorpion unit, citing a cloud of dishonor from newly released video that showed some of its officers beating Tyree Nichols to death after stopping the black motorist. Police Director Sarah C.J. Davis acted a day after the harrowing video emerged, saying that she listened to Nichols' relatives, community leaders, and uninvolved officers in making the decision. It came as the nation and the city struggled to come to grips with the violence of the officers who were also black. The video renewed doubts about why fatal encounters with law enforcement keep happening despite repeated calls for change. Well, that has fatal encounters with police most of the time have nothing to do with the police's actions.
A lot of the time.
Yeah. Like, you look at the important incidents that have occurred over the past 3 years since the start of 2020, and even beyond there, the famous ones which we've always heard of, Michael Brown, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. You think of Rayshard Brooks. You think of Jacob Blake. All of these names in which they say this is systemic racism. This is systemic injustice against black people on behalf of the police. Every single one of those cases, the police officers were not the ones at fault and not the ones directly responsible for their deaths. Now, there were some actions which were not absolutely the most reputable, but their actions did not directly cause death. And we can go through all of them, but we just not going to be bothered. I've gone through them before, long time ago. I think it was back like episode 40. I went through case by case by case, detailing all of these things, and our friend Shelly's daughter basically repeated what I had said, and she got in a lot of trouble. So, I'm sorry about that, but telling the truth offends some people.
That's the problem, is that whenever you claim that what do you call it, that whenever you claim that something shouldn't be said because it'll offend you,
yeah,
that's a completely and totally garbage claim, because this is how they control speech. Remember, the whole idea "I'm offended" has only one purpose behind it. It's not a good purpose. It's censorship. It's we want to get you to stop saying things that we don't like or things that we want to avoid, and so it's all censorship. And that's basically everyone who follows the Marxist, leftist, lunatic left approach follows this pattern. Okay, this is not by accident. That everyone's been taught. This is what you do. This is how you do it. And they all follow the exact same things. This is why a lot of people speculate it's a cult, because cults give people strategies on how to engage with outsiders. And by the way, all of this is completely on par with what they're doing. So, yeah, the whole thing about being offended, I'm like, give me a break.
Yeah, but some people thought that white people needed to realize why this was affecting black people so much. Whoopi Goldberg, who is known for famously bad takes, asked if white people need to get beaten up for police reform to occur. So let's enjoy that. It was horrifically bad.
But, when will the brutality finally lead to some police reform from the ground up? Because clearly, it doesn't matter if it's a white policeman or a black policeman. It is a problem in the police, in the policing itself. Seems things don't seem to make sense to people unless it's somebody they can feel or they can recognize. But how many times do we need to see white people also get beaten before anybody will do anything? I'm not suggesting that. So don't write us and tell me what a racist I am.
Because it's true. This is from a person who also suggested that Nazis were not racist.
Of course.
So, yeah, Whoopi, known for famously bad takes. But what she's suggesting is, we need to hit people at home if they're going to understand the problems. And it's like, well, you're suggesting that if police are beating up people en masse, then white people, then it'll be generally accepted that there's a massive problem. It's like, yes, if they're beating up people en masse and they're beating people up for no apparent reason, then yes, people would accept there's a problem. Nobody looks at the Tyree Irving case too. Tyree Nichols case. And says, "Oh, the police are in the right." Nobody has said that.
Nobody said that at all. By the way, can you do me a favor, Stephen? Can you go? I sent it to you by messenger. This is. I was like, dang, where is this video? Because this is relevant. There's a video that came out that was shown by a lot of people on Twitter. Basically, a white woman, I think he's a professor, who basically said that, oh, by the way, the cops didn't do this. The black city council and black mayor didn't do this. We did this. Like this is one of the most like clownish videos that came out.
listening, paying attention. I wouldn't mind if you would do this with me. We rub our chests.
Never.
We find our heartbeat.
No, never.
And we say, we did this.
No.
We did this. White supremacy did this.
Nope.
Nope.
I'm talking about Tyree Nichols. The police didn't do this.
Yes, they did. You're the only one not to blame the police.
The Memphis Police Department didn't do this.
Yeah, they did.
White supremacy did this.
No, you're an idiot.
I got a message.
Like, that is so unequivocally stupid.
By the way, that got 2.4 million views.
Oh my gosh.
That's a stupid take. That's a stupid take, but it's not that far off.
It's not that far off from what the mainstream
supposed,
media. Yeah.
The supposed mainstream media, the trusted news.
Well, like,
is
what
doing.
was it? CNN. Van
CNN,
Jones.
the CNN guy.
Van Jones said, like, yes, you can feel the extensions of white supremacy in this act. It's like, you moron. Whiteness and racial tension and white supremacy had nothing to do with this incident, and trying to turn this into a racial incident only further divides an already divisive culture.
It just goes to demonstrate these people are race hustlers.
Yes.
That's what they are. They're what are they called? Al Sharpton all the time. He's a race baiter or a race
hustler.
Race hustler. Yeah, these are people. And by the way, this all goes back to one word. One word you need to know, and go to your dictionary, write it down. Just make sure you remember this word: demagogue. What do demagogues do? A demagogue is somebody who takes advantage of a crisis and uses it for their own selfish needs or pleasures, or their own ends. And that almost exclusively, demagogues are always like dishonest. They always rely on lies, deception, or lies of omission to try to like fool people into like getting their cause. A good example of a demagogue would be what's his name, Gaston from Lord of the Rings, from Beauty and the Beast, right? And demagogues are pretty much everywhere in the media. They're everywhere, and they're far more prominent on the left, because the left has zero problems lying. Zero problems. You will know this. The more you get into the conservative side, the conservative political side, it becomes so undeniable. It is impossible not to see it. It's like the Matrix. You can't unsee it once you've seen it.
Yeah.
Like
once you've taken the pill.
Oh, we go back all the way back to like the Kavanaugh case. People were literally like believing the most outrageous nonsense and absurdities. Like, he was gang raping women in like a dorm, like, just like one after the other. It was like, give me a break. Or the whole race hoax with Jussie Smollett.
Yep.
Or the
the garage pole rope, the hijab scissor girl.
The hijacked girl here in Canada, remember that?
Yeah, that was the hijab. That was the hijab scissor girl.
Supposedly somebody cut her hair. That was a hoax. Yep. Even like the supposed like cemetery for like children.
Yep.
In Kamloops, BC.
That
was a hoax.
The residential mass graves. Yep.
Yep, that was a hoax. It's demagogues, and you have to call it out, because remember what the lunatic left does. And by the way, I use that very intentionally, because they are lunatics in the sense that they're willing to spread complete and total nonsense and lies, and are reckless in what they do. The lunatic left, what they do is they always try to take the moral high ground. That is always their bread and butter. High ground. Oh, I'm so morally outraged. That's what Whippy's doing. So what you have to do is you have to go after that high horse.
Yeah.
Because the high horse is basically nothing more than smoke.
Yes.
And it's very easy to take it down if you just point out that how completely and totally morally hypocritical they are. That's what you got to do. That's what we got to do.
So many people are trying to assume what the cause of this incident was. Some are saying that these police officers were involved in a gang. Others saying that Tyree Nichols was involved with one of the police officers' wives.
Stephen, the devil made them do it.
I know. Well, like, the most significant piece of evidence so far that we have is that several of these officers were hired when the Memphis Police Department lowered their standards. But the Memphis Police Department is not alone in lowering their standards for hiring police officers. The London Police in the UK recruits illiterate officers who can barely write English to meet diversity quotas. They may also have criminal records.
Yeah.
So a 2014 promise to have 40% of the force be represented by ethnic minorities by 2023 has fallen well short, with just 17% of officers being from diverse backgrounds. Matt Parr, the head of the organization responsible for inspecting British police forces, told the Telegraph of London that which will likely be a minority white city in the next decade or so should not be policed by an overwhelmingly white police force. Applicants to the police who can barely write in English are being accepted by the Met in an attempt to improve diversity, one of His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary has warned. That's entirely stupid.
Imagine for a second, Stephen, if you're building a house, okay? You're constructing a house. You get to decide who the people are. Imagine getting a crew of framers who have never framed before, who don't even know anything about framing, and they're responsible for doing that. And people who are pouring the foundation, that it's like their second week at the job.
Yeah.
And they don't have anyone experienced. It's just like a whole bunch of and you just pile that on.
And you go there and you're like, okay, like what? Like, why is this being built this way? And it's like, well, we had to do this for diversity quotas.
Why is the house leaning like the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It's like, we're still trying to figure that out.
Well, like what Michael Knowles was reporting, they apparently Google fired an executive, because he wasn't diverse enough, and because he would not hire diverse people. And he would not fire white people or men to be replaced by women.
Yeah.
Like this is how woke our society is getting, in that, oh, we have to meet diversity quotas. Oh, we have to meet gender quotas. Oh, we have to meet minority sexuality quotas. It is creating a society that is more about diversity of appearance than it is about diversity of viewpoints and actually having people that you can engage with across the aisle.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an episode of one of my favorite shows is Community. There's an episode of Community where there's a whole scandal because apparently the school hired or basically gave a degree to a man who, an engineering degree, and he ended up building a bridge that tons of people died. Because he had no idea what he was doing. Mm-hmm. That is basically a microcosm of what they're doing. Yeah, they're creating like Candace Owens has talked about this. They're like people are getting dumber.
Yes.
Now when they graduate from university, they're dumber when they leave than when
they do worse at civics tests.
Yes, and they have no idea about anything. They don't know anything about geography
because their brains have been filled with wokeism.
It really is. It's true, and. The problem is we are creating, and this is by design. Don't forget, this is by design because the woke leftist lunatics, what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a society of complicit people who are easy to control, and they're trying to completely and totally disarm any of the people that might be able to push back, including any of the freedom fighters, any strong men, because they're trying to completely demolish manhood. Mm-hmm. Turning it into like some kind of a negative thing, and they're trying to disarm white people. Because why? Because white people are the numerically, statistically, they're the biggest demographic in the country, and obviously the demographic that controls the most power. So why do they go after white people? Because then they can weaponize the entire minority communities, use them as basically paramilitary forces to go after the system. And basically tear down the system so they can rebuild it in a socialist utopia, which is what they want to create. So yeah, it's a mess right now. But...
It is a mess. It is a mess. So you may be hearing a lot of narratives about this story. Yes, we are very against police brutality, but that does not make us in support of diversity hiring and racializing every story for the purpose of clicks.
Yeah, it's basically hysteria. That's the best way to put it. Yes, this stuff happens. Yes, absolutely it's tragic. But there's a difference between bringing attention to something and creating an intentional hysteria. and that's the problem with these stories. Kyrie Urban, like
Tyree
Tyree
Nichols.
Nichols is an example of a problem that is actually quite I've even seen some stories of white people that had the same treatment, got killed by police, totally unjustified,
Yeah,
and yet
basically-
nobody hears about them.
Well, you and I we're probably thinking of the exact same case when it comes to mistreatment of white people, and basically squashed by the media.
Right, because remember they have a purpose.
Yeah.
Their purpose is not to report fairly. Their purpose is to try to get people crazy, riled up, and make them believe that America is like the most racist country in the history of the universe.
But what happened to Tyree Nichols, is no less evil and no more evil than what happened to Daniel Shaver.
That's right.
So, but speaking of great evil and corruption, let's talk about Joe Biden.
Meanwhile, the Legion of Doom.
You want me to do it?
Go for it.
Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom.
Say the word. Say the line, Bart. Say the line.
Joe Biden sends tanks to Ukraine after warning doing so would be World War III. Joe Biden, you just love creating situations which would lead to World War III. There's a reason you're good friends with Zelensky.
Mr. Sellout.
Yeah. Biden announced last week the United States would send 31 Abrams N1 main battle tanks to Ukraine at what amounts to an escalation of American support for Ukraine's conflict with Russia. With spring approaching, Ukrainian forces are working to defend the territory they hold and preparing for an additional counteroffensives to liberate their land. They need to be able to counter Russia's evolving tactics and strategy on the battlefield in the very near term. They need to improve their ability to maneuver in open terrain. They need an enduring capability to deter and defend against Russian aggression over the long term. So, Biden's decision to send the equivalent of one Ukrainian battalion of tank contrasts with his decision in March not to send 28 Soviet MiGs. He argued that sending fighter jets and tanks would escalate to a global conflict. Yes!
Funny how that works.
The idea that we're going into sending defensive equipment.
Come on, man.
And have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews. Just understand, don't kid yourself, no matter what you'll say. That's called World War III. The president explained to the group of House Democrats in March.
I stood up to like corn pop. I can stand up to Putin.
That's right. Deploying offensive weapons against a nuclear power was a terrible idea, Representative Thomas Massey wrote. No kidding. It's just like obvious.
It's like poking a bear in hibernation. It's like, hey, are you alive, bear? You alive?
Yeah. Senator Mike Lee said, is there any point to which the War Powers Act could be triggered by our delivery of weapons to Ukraine? Should the answer to the first two questions determine whether a declaration of war or congressional authorization for use of military force is necessary for the United States to continue giving Ukraine weapons to use against an increasingly hostile Russia? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not what any rational person in the United States, in Canada, or in the European Union should want. Yeah. But Biden has ties and a reputation to uphold, and
dumbest politician in the he's basically a sellout for hire.
Okay, I'm switching these stories.
Which ones?
The HHS and the Gateway Pundit, because it makes more sense. Yeah,
sure, go for it.
Because Biden and Zelensky have ties.
Yes, they do.
Zelensky set out a government decree to destroy all information on Hunter Biden's Metabiota company on the same day as the Russian invasion. Then fire spotted outside Intel headquarters.
Yeah, what are the odds?
So Russia invaded Ukraine on the February 24th of 2022. Zelensky sent out this document, which is pictured here, on February 24th, 2022. DC Drano reported on this development today. Did Zelensky keep some of the more incriminating documents against Hunter and Metabiota and Burisma to use as extortion against Joe Biden to get more money and weapons? Zelensky sent out a decree on February 24th for all government officials to destroy all information on the Ukrainian Research Anti-Plague Institute, Mekhanov Institute of Health of Ukraine, and the Zhytomyr Regional Laboratory Centers of the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, who all worked with Metabiota Inc. Metabiota scientists. These two documents were originally posted in June 2022, but today we can confirm that these documents are authentic. And of course, this is the document right here. saying that they should get rid of these organizations and entities. So, yeah, there's some real serious problematic connections between Vladimir Zelensky, or Volodymyr, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden is compromised when it comes to Ukraine. We knew that since 2014. When Hunter Biden was having connections with Burisma, and Joe Biden went to the prosecutor and said, if you don't fire that prosecutor, then you don't get the money. And, oh, look, the prosecutor, an hour later, the prosecutor was fired. So we sent the money. Oh, good. That's a quid pro quo. Does the media care? No. Does the FBI care? No. Should they care? Yes, very much so. He used federal government funds to bail his son out from a foreign government investigating him. And that's well known. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, his son was involved in this metabiota. And as soon as the Russian invasion started, they're like, yeah, one of the first things we have to do is we have to destroy these metabiota facilities to destroy any link between the Ukrainian government and the Bidens. That's corruption at the highest level. The pinnacle of corruption, because that's why the Bidens are the Biden crime family. But
Pinnacle of corruption.
the pinnacle of corruption.
I also heard that what was it? A whole bunch. I heard this in a report from one of the media organizations. They were saying that like a lot of like the very high end, like the government agents, government officials are quitting, have like resigned from like the Zelensky government recently. So like and a lot of the allegations are that a lot of them are basically like funneling money from like these supposed American and international money shipments sent over there, and they're basically taking all this money and using it to buy themselves homes, cars, all sorts of this is basically like the Ukrainian version of BLM.
Yep.
That's what's going on over there. So I mean, tell me again why it's a given that we have to support Ukraine. I'm not saying we shouldn't support
Completely.
help people in need.
Nobody's saying that we should completely abandon them. Nobody is saying that we shouldn't help people in need. But we have to look at the situation. Sending the amount of money that the American and Canadian governments have sent them, sending the amount of military resources, which is clearly looking to Russia as if we're sending them what equates to essentially, well, that we're giving them machines of war. We're giving them billions of dollars in machines of war.
Yeah. And there's absolutely no accountability for the money.
Well, we're doing exactly what happened in the Korean War. The Chinese aided the North Koreans against the South Koreans.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's a proxy war.
Yeah, it's a proxy war. And it's like, when is Russia going to say, all right, we've had it with your proxy war, then you stop this or we're going to be involved with a hot war?
Yeah, well, it's different here because a lot of the wars with the Soviet Union were proxy wars in that, the wars were fought by local people, but against so the Vietnam War would be a better example because unlike the Korean War, the Soviets were not actually fighting in that. Neither were the Chinese. Mm-hmm. That was the North Koreans being basically funded and supported by the Soviets. That's what it was. But it was American troops fighting. Same with Vietnam. The American troops were the ones fighting, helping the South Vietnam, to hold off. In this case, it's Russia itself is the one battling. They're not actually helping local troops. So this is why you have to be super careful because unlike Syria, which was a true proxy war because America and Russia and all these other people, and even Iran, were not directly involved in the fighting or in the battling. They were basically helping local forces to basically fight the war. In this case, however, Russia is directly involved. And so you're doing some very sketchy things. The whole Ukrainian war, like the Russia and Ukraine and all that, it reeks of the kind of misinformation that they've been feeding us forever. Of all of the deceptive lies that is not about the war. there's clearly something else going on, which is like that's making this war happen. Obviously, like you have to kind of like figure out which theory makes the most sense to you. But it's not about the war. Like, let's just face it. There's something going on. There's a reason why all of these governments internationally are acting in lockstep, and everyone's got the same talking point, the same narrative, and we're just sending money like it's like like printing like I don't know, like lottery tickets. Like
Oodles, boodles, and toastal strudels of money.
So obviously something else is going on. There's theories about that. This is a way of money laundering. Not international.
Not the first time the Bidens have done it.
Yep. There's also a lot of theories about that there's a whole bunch of corruption between the United States and Ukraine that they're trying to keep silent.
Yep.
Which is why they're going out of their way to send it. Dan Bongino even talked about how, and he makes a very good case. He talks about how Biden is actually a foreign agent, meaning that he has made arrangements and agreements to work for to work on behalf of foreign interests for their interests and not for the Americans' interests. Now, that's not illegal, but it is illegal to do it without declaring it officially, which is why it would be illegal, because Biden has not declared that, but it's pretty obvious that he's working for foreign interests. And that may be a scandal that completely and totally brings him down. So, yeah, this is all
We can only hope.
Yeah.
So until he comes down, he's going to continue pulling crap like this.
Yes.
AHS weighs abortion access actions. HHS. Including possible health emergency declaration, because apparently they just ended the COVID health emergency, so let's have an abortion health emergency.
Let's just launch everything in emergency.
So both abortion rights advocates and Democratic lawmakers have urged the Department of Health and Human Services and President Biden to take such a step in response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which they say has created a full-scale reproductive health crisis across the United States. The lawmakers argue that such a move would allow the administration to help support states and protect abortion, deploy public health services, corpse teams, and give the government the ability to accelerate access to new medications authorized for abortion. What he's saying, there are discussions of wide ranges of measures that we can take to try and protect people's rights. HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra told Axios, there are certain criteria that you look for to be able to declare a public health emergency that's typically done by scientists and those that are professionals in those fields, who will tell us whether we are in a state of emergency, and based on that, I have the ability to make a declaration. There hasn't been a full assessment on what a declaration would mean. So,
in other words, they haven't yet figured out how to make it up.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what's going on over there.
Which is absolutely disgusting, because basically they're just going to overrule the courts because they feel like they want... Well, they want what they want, and nothing is going to stop them.
Yeah, you have to remember that all of the people involved in the U.S., particularly the Democratic Party, I know like people always say like, oh, there's corruption on both sides. Yes, there is, but we talk about scale.
Yeah,
Scale
is way different.
Scale of the evil that runs in the Democratic Party is not comparable to whatever's going on in the Republican Party. It just isn't comparable, not at all. Like not that long ago, they had a vote in the House, basically saying, do we want to make it illegal to basically murder a child that's been born after a botched abortion? All of the Democrats all voted against it in lockstep because they're the Borg. They're not allowed to have independent thoughts on abortion. Whereas like most Republicans, like, obviously there's like exceptions, but most Republicans voted in favor of it. This is like not defensible in any way. But what they're doing is they're following the Marxist approach. Okay. People who have no principles, people who have no integrity, and people who have no sense of right and wrong, to them, the ends always justifies the means. They can if they can kill their grandmother, and that would help them to get full abortion legalization everywhere, they would do it. They would have no problem. They would kill 1,000 puppies if that meant that they could get full abortion everywhere. Because this is the way these people think. They don't think about right and wrong. They think about power. I want this. I'm not willing to talk to anybody or convince anybody of my belief. I just want it. We're going to make it happen. And we don't, they don't even mind cheating and cheating the system in order to make it. The Biden administration showed that when they tried to use, what are the government agencies? I forget which one, to enforce a vaccine mandate.
Oh.
What was that?
Occupational health. It was
OSHA. Yeah, OSHA. They tried to use OSHA to enforce a vax mandate, and everyone knew this was a completely.
It was subversion.
So they were trying to cheat.
Yeah.
And the problem is you have cheaters who have no problem cheating whatsoever, and they will always defend their cheating and say it's for the greater good.
Yep.
Because again, the greater good means anything goes as long as I get what I want. And that is what that whole thing about them using the like the emergency declaration to get abortion. That's basically them trying to cheat. They don't like the results. We're going to
change the rules.
We will change the rules in order to get what we want. That's why you cannot fight this fight with just trying to like play by the rules. You have to treat these people as legitimate enemies of the people.
Yeah.
Go after that high horse. But thankfully, there is one person.
There's one. Well, okay, there are several, but one rises above.
One person that gives us a lot of hope.
DeSantis 2024.
DeSantis for the win.
Florida demands American Academy of Pediatrics give evidence for their support of child sex changes. So the AAP has been ordered to provide the state of Florida with evidence explaining why it supports child sex changes and documentation showing the process the Medical Association went through in order to reach that stance. The district court ruling comes as part of legal action against the state of Florida brought by 4 plaintiffs and backed by the AAP that seeks to overturn Governor Ron DeSantis' ban on Medicaid funding for the child sex changes. In pledging its support for the 4 minors who identify as trans and have launched a legal challenge for the ban, the spotlight has now turned on the AAP, which now needs to provide scientific evidence to back up the support of so-called gender-affirming care, reports the Daily Caller. Judge Carl J. Nichols ordered the AAP to hand over the information on the total number of its members, documentation relating to how it establishes new guidelines, as well as any guidelines and policy positions on gender-affirming care, including how these guidelines and policies were drawn up. All this information must be provided to the state of Florida by February 2nd, which is, of course, by Thursday.
They got 2 days.
They got 2 days to provide this information to the state.
I like to think that they're going to have a tough time coming up.
I have a feeling they're going to try and ask an extension, and then another extension, and then another extension, and then it's like, well, it's been so long. Like, why do we have to? Why do we actually have to provide it in the first place? Like,
yeah,
this has just been proven, guys.
It's just obvious. Come on, it's like so obvious. Come on, people.
So obvious. So yeah, this is. We know that child sex changes are wrong. So does the state of Florida. So does many other states around the United States. Florida is taking the steps to challenge, using the courts, using the system, making sure that the public is aware of what these organizations, what these government programs, and what these institutions want to do, not just with adults, but with our kids.
Yeah. Good job, Ron DeSantis. He's basically always standing up for... He's basically like he is so rare in the world right now. This is the kind of guy that everyone needs DeSantis in their corner.
Everybody does.
But here's another person that I have to admit I have an enormous amount of respect for, and I really do hope that somehow they win
change,
this thing, because it is
hope against hope.
It is blatantly obvious that
there were problems with the muffin sale.
Yeah, the lady who's now who was her name? The lady in charge of the
Arizona
one.
Oh, yeah. Hobbs, Katie Hobbs.
Katie Hobbs. It is blatantly obvious that she rigged the muffin sale.
Yes,
and there's the evidence that's brought up. It continues to get more and more damning. It's crazy. So yeah, take it away.
Yep. Okay, so from the Gateway Pundit, Kari Lake's attorneys respond to phony allegation of the attempted political persecution by Arizona's new regime. So the legal team has responded to the questionably elected Arizona Secretary of State and former Mexican drug cartel lawyer Adrian Fontes' phony allegation and request for attorney Chris Mayes to investigate and take appropriate enforcement action against Kari Lake. They are politically persecuting Kari for sending the alarm about the muffin sale of 2022. Both these candidates won highly questionable muffin sales in Maricopa and are terrified of Kari Lake's fight against stolen elections. Jailing political opponents is a third world consequence of speaking out against a fraudulently installed regime. As the Gateway Pundit reported, Brazil's Stasi Supreme Court issued arrest warrants last month targeting opposition figures for undemocratic acts against Lula da Silva's stole the presidential election in Brazil. Gateway Pundit reported extensively on the 2022 muffin sale in Maricopa and Kari Lake's lawsuit alleging enormous issues with the muffin sale. Massive chain of custody failures reported over 298,000 ballots that were invalid. Nearly 300,000 mismatched or fraudulent mail-in ballots. Signatures were illegally counted. Intentional voting machine ballot printer failures on election day disenfranchised in-person voters who turned out for Republicans 3-1. So there's actually a great map that they show on this page. So there is a heat map where it has locations of machine failures, and apparently on election day, at least 7,000 ballots rejected every 30 minutes, according to the video.
And of course, these were all in
Republican districts. So this is 30-minute time intervals, and this is all of insert failures because they were insert failures because the printer said it caused incorrectly sized images of ballots to be printed onto the ballot papers the day that Republicans turned out.
What they basically explained, I remember watching this. The ballot, like these machines, are designed for 20-inch ballots, or 20 whatever the measurement was, and they were actually printed on 19-inch ballot paper, meaning that is not an accident. In order to do that, it has to be on. You don't accidentally print thousands upon thousands of ballots on completely incorrect paper, because there was a lot of ballots that were correct, and so they're basically saying that this was too intentional to be an accident. Then you have a whole bunch of issues about a lot of ballots that there was a completely broken chain of custody, meaning that for a certain period of those ballots being transported, there's a time period where it's not accounted for. And anytime you have any ballots that are not accounted for, that you can't account for, like that chain of custody, that those become invalid. It's kind of like in if you're a police, if you're doing an investigation, police offices, if you lose track of the evidence at any point, that evidence is no longer admissible. And it happens all the time because people lose track of the chain of custody. According to the previous story, the first story, there was close to 500,000 ballots that either had signature verification problems, voting machine failures, or chain of custody issues. That is a ton of votes that were counted that are highly suspect. Altogether, like anybody who asks you about what's going on in Arizona, these are not fraudulent, like they're just sore loose. These are legitimate things that are happening, and legitimate evidence of like severe problems with that muffin sale. By the way, one thing that I don't know if you saw, Stephen, but in the Kari Lake, she had a big, humongous, like a rally, I guess you could call it, with all the supporters. It was like so full that the venue could barely hold her. She actually had President Trump call in, which I thought was, that is so cool. That is very, very cool. A lot of people were like, of course, criticizing Trump because they're saying like, oh, well, Trump is like saying that she's going to win like that. Well, I'm like, well, I mean, hopeful thinking, but good on Trump. This is like one of the reasons why I really liked him as president, because he would actually do this. He would actually legitimately do these unexpected, shows of support for people that really do need that kind of like support. So, yeah, it's the reason why people love Trump. I'm definitely hoping the best for Kara Lake, because I really do believe I really do believe, based on everything, that she absolutely won that muffin sale, and that everything is pointing to the fact that that this muffin sale was problematic. By the way, there's a short little video at the very bottom of the second article. I don't know if you can play it, Stephen. Very bottom. There's. Oh, there's gonna be an ad in there.
It's Rumble. There will be an ad.
It's Rumble. Why Rumble? Why Rumble? Why? But yeah, so far we've been following this story forever, and honestly,
jam and spit out ballots, which is exactly what happened all day on election day. Ballots got spit out. They got spit out over and over again. And Richer and Gates, let's show those two again. These two men, we pay their salary. We, the people, pay their salary. We pay for our elections. These two men had the gall to say that was just a hiccup. That was a hiccup. You waited for hours in line.
go to the 2-minute mark, 2:11.
Those were the worst case scenario. These other pins here are areas where the tabulators are spitting out ballots all day as well. Now let's, just for the fun of it, for grins and giggles, let's overlay those two maps real quick. Oh, now I'm starting to figure out why they needed that heat map. Isn't that something? I'm sure it's just a coincidence, guys. Purely a coincidence.
They're giving you a pause there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, no,
basically,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We were saying this for that's the problem, is you can have, as I stated earlier, oodles, boodles, and toaster strudels of things to say, oh look, muffin sales are irregular, muffin sales are fraudulent, muffin sales are exceptionally problematic, and the other side will simply say, nope, they're not. It's the safest, most secure muffin sale in human history, and there's nothing to see here, and nothing you can say can change my mind. And it's like,
move along.
Why? Well, it's the exact same with the jibby jabs. Why won't they let us ask the questions? Mm-hmm. If they don't let you ask the questions, something is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the biggest sign that you know that something is wrong.
Yeah, and by the way, Stephen, you and I did we did a long little expose kind of segment on the American jibby jabs of 2020, and we were just shocked at the amount. Muffin sale, yeah. The American Muffin Sale 2020, and we were just
shocking.
The sheer amount of things that were being brought up.
Issues that were prevalent, of things that were never addressed, and you talk to people who believe that the muffin sale was perfect, and they're like, everything was addressed in court. It's like, nothing was addressed in court.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was,
nothing was.
Yeah. There's
something called standing. And if you throw out cases on standing, that's not addressing it in court.
It's the infamous muffin sale cover-up.
Yep, muffin sale cover-up of 2020.
Yeah, and the problem here is that, of course, this is what they do here. We talked about this even I think last week. Canada, particularly the federal government, is trying to say that the reason people don't trust the government is because of misinformation. And I'm like, it's the complete opposite. The reason people don't trust you is because of your misinformation.
Because you keep pushing that anything that comes from your mouth is as pure as the driven snow, and anything that comes from anyone who disagrees with you, from a dissenter, is automatically wrong.
Mm-hmm. It's the ultimate form of gaslighting. It's brutal. Yeah. But here, let's move on to this story. This is another example of the ultimate gaslighting. People are not allowed to ask legitimate questions because of concerns, but we're going to cover two stories, two articles. One is from, obviously, an advocacy group. This is a freedom advocacy group. And the other one is from a mainstream media article. So yeah, so the first one's from BC Rise. Edmonton wants to make a 15-minute city, discourages individual vehicles. Let's go into what they basically bring up.
So the city of Edmonton announced its interest in building what is being pitched as a 15-minute city for residents, which appears to have, for your convenience, talking point to sell the idea. The city is looking to centralize the population into concentrated, dense living boundaries known as districts. Neighborhoods will be merged together, forming districts. District planning is a multi-year project to build communities, a community of communities, small towns in our big city where people can meet many of their daily needs within 15 minutes from where they live. The city plan appears to be dominated with a radical focus on climate change by setting collective city carbon emission targets and individual carbon emission targets, including the idea of centralizing society. So, greener as we grow targets. Achieve total community-wide carbon budget of 135 megatons, 2 million new urban trees planted, and of course, net per person greenhouse gases are 0.
Okay. Now,
So let's focus on that.
Go to the part that says communities targets page 12. These are the goals that they have. So maybe you can cover those really quick.
Yeah. City plan talks about the community of communities where its goal by 2030 is to have 50% of trips by individuals done on public transit and active transportation, which is described as using walking, rolling, or biking. Community of communities.
Discouraging
individual vehicles. Community of communities aims to break down individual personal privacy to make life feel less anonymous in a big city. The government plans to create policy to constrain living and activity within the 15-minute city for people to live more locally. The city's goal is to stop people from living in the suburbs and rural areas and ban all future rural residential development. Prevent all further subdivision of rural residential or agricultural land that creates additional rural residential parcels and would otherwise facilitate further country residential development. It says in the city plan.
Yes. Now, by the way, that video, you don't have to play it, Stephen, but that video there, it obviously it was linked on purpose because that video is about a pilot project in a place in Oxford, a place called Oxfordshire, where they're already basically putting in features that are enforcing, or they're basically slow rolling this little by little. They want to just start introducing people slowly to the idea, and then gradually they're going to start adding more and more and more. Eventually, in this little town in England, or in UK, which is basically the first place to do this, they basically want to use all sorts of camera, like license plate scanning technology. They're going to use facial recognition, all this other stuff. And one of the things that is the most draconian and dystopian of all is that they're basically going to say that in order to leave your district, you have to ask permission from the government. Now, of course, at the beginning, it's going to be very generous and just ask permission, you're good. But once you've established a system like that, that's when they can start gripping harder and making it so that you are basically in your little prison system. Why is this this is insanity? And of course, you have to remember the people that want to make this happen are part of a bigger agenda. Why do they keep referring to 2030? Because this all comes from the WEF's nightmarish view that they have to create the Great Reset by 2030. All of them want to do this. This is part of a bigger plan. Now, what is the number one thing they're going to do one of the things that they have to do to successfully be able to implement this is they have to completely and totally shut down any people that might
might try and raise flags about this.
Yeah, because they need the people to be completely ignorant of their plans in order to keep doing that. The biggest enemy to their plans is sunlight. They can't have anyone exposing this.
So from City News, online conspiracy theories about Edmonton's 15-minute city plan. Absolute nonsense.
Of course. Here comes
Edmonton's
the gas
district plan about how the city is preparing for population growth, but what exactly does it mean to be a 15-minute city? The urban plan aims to give residents access to most of what they need within 15 minutes of their home. All of these things within 15 minutes of your front door, said Councillor Tim Cartmell. He said some Edmontonians like himself already live in districts that have most of what you need within a 15-minute walk or bike ride, but he points to neighborhoods like Windermere in his ward as still lacking some key amenities. You can send your kid on a bike down to the splash park or the skateboard park, which you cannot do in Windermere right now because they don't exist. The plan has been in the works since 2020 as part of the city plan and is anticipated to be back before council this summer. Online conspiracy theories. But the Urban Planning Initiative has recently been getting negative attention with the basis claim this is an attempt to lock people in their neighborhoods. Whoever is suggesting them must really be entertaining themselves with how many people they've gotten to bite because it's absolute nonsense. Amarjeet Soul expects the majority of Edmontonians are very smart and sophisticated people who will not believe this conspiracy theory being promoted online.
Yeah. This is what they do. This is the fact-checking regime, and they always come out immediately that they call... Basically what they do is they call people crazy. Anybody who raises concerns about like this pattern, because remember, they're in lockstep all over the world. All people all over the world, governments all over the world are doing the same things. So people have a right to actually question these things, and they have to provide people with like proper assurances. Instead, they just call you crazy. Mm-hmm. If any concerns on this, and they use completely and totally fraudulent and completely dishonest methods to try to fact check these things. This is what they do. The fact checkers come out, and the fact checkers are always looking for totally BS like ways of supposedly debunking these ideas. What they say, people say, for example, someone might say, you know what? I heard that they're doing this in other places, and the goal is to eventually make it so that people can leave their neighborhoods. And the fact checkers will come out and say, no one's being locked in their neighborhood, so this is a completely and totally false claim. It's like, of course it is. Nobody said that people are actually being locked in their neighborhoods. They're saying that the goal or that the potential ramifications of the system may be that this may be a goal or an outcome in the future. This is the fraudulent and dishonest way that they do this. So the reason why this is important to bring up. Now, I haven't researched this ad nauseum. I don't know. I haven't read the plan of the Edmonton City Council, all that kind of stuff. But I do know that the Edmonton City Council, as well as Calgary City Council, have been taken over by climate change ideologues. And the Calgary mayor, basically, on I think like in the first couple of days of her tenure, declared a climate emergency, a permanent climate emergency here in Calgary. Why would you do something like that insane? Because they basically have a plan, and they have to install it in phases. The problem is that when you start to see these things that are already happening elsewhere in the world start to creep in places here, that's when you should start being worried, because it looks like they're trying to slow roll it. And of course, they'll never put it in all at once. They'll never do that. If they plan to make these 15-minute prisons, they're not going to do it on day one. They're going to start by making sure people are aware, oh, I'm in District 5, I'm in District 6, I'm in District 12, I'm Katniss Everdeen, and then get them used to this idea. Mm-hmm. And they start to create these limits on leaving your district, obviously for your own good, because and they're going to use all sorts of justifications like, oh, we're trying to save the environment by reducing carbon. Oh, we're trying to limit the impact on roads and all that kind of stuff. And then after they get people used to that, then they'll start introducing penalties for leaving your district. And then they'll start and of course they've already started introducing in the federal government and other places plans to completely and totally cancel all gas-powered vehicle sales by 2035. They've already said that. So if they're planning to completely phase out cars, then what are people left with? Mm-hmm. People are left with buses, and people are left with, just basically moving on bikes, which means that people's ability to move and to leave are incredibly targeted, and you basically are now completely dependent on the government to be able to travel anywhere. And by the way, all of this is not far-fetched. This isn't like some dystopian thing. They're already doing this in China, and they're trying to bring China and the Chinese system of social credit system here. So just be ready. This is what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Right, Steve?
Yep.
Move on.
Oh yeah, I'm ready to move on. I am ready to move on.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about BC.
Oh, BC.
Yeah.
That
Ugh.
communist hellhole.
Yes. Local doctors concerned over BC's new bill to regulate health professions. So local healthcare professionals are criticizing BC's newly passed legislation that will make sweeping changes to how health colleges in the province are regulated. Kelowna physician Dr. Joshua Nordine says Bill 36, the Health Professions and Occupations Act, was rammed through the legislation in November with little consultation with those in the professions that will be impacted. The new law, which has yet to go into effect, will consolidate the number of BC's health colleges regulators from 15 to 6. The boards will now be wholly appointed by the government, while they were previously partially populated by people who had been elected by those in the profession. The colleges will be monitored by a new oversight body, and the complaints process is being reformed with an independent discipline tribunal. Nordline, along with Kelowna dentist Trevor Mohaliak, spoke with Castanet about their concerns about the new legislation. They say they've heard from many other colleagues who feel the same. But of even more concern to them is many of their colleagues and patients haven't even heard of Bill 36. If something goes through an investigation process, we now have to run to lawyers and get affidavits. It's no longer good enough to say this is what happened for my version of events, and here's the chart and everything else. It's going to burden down any sort of complaint process. He's also concerned with how the new disciplinary tribunal will be publicly publishing all findings of misconduct. They'll publish their veneered account of things. Nordland says, it's their veneered version of events. All findings are going to be published. It's a very top-down approach, very bureaucratic. Yeah, this is hearing that it's going to be, it's basically going to be a doctor's review panel that is established by the government, not established by the doctors. Yep. It's basically just like, how can we punish those doctors who dissent?
Yeah.
And that's absolutely unacceptable.
They're basically one of the things that protects you in healthcare is you need to have a robust system that warns people against potential safety signals. Okay, you need to have doctors that have the freedom to say, hey, there's a problem with this or a problem with that. What they're creating a system where no doctor anywhere in BC is allowed to voice any opinion that disagrees with the powers that be. That is a recipe for an absolute disaster. And that's Soviet style, that's Chinese style communism. When you are not allowed to criticize or even raise concerns. Because remember, the doctor we talked about, you and me, Stephen, Dr. Charles Hoff, all he did was raise concerns.
Yep.
He's like, I have 8 patients. All of them are showing some very severe signs of potential injuries from the jibby jabs. All he did was raise concerns. He wasn't trying to discredit anybody. He wasn't even trying to make crazy claims. But for his trouble of just raising concerns about what's going on, he was severely attacked and penalized. What they've done in BC is they've taken what once was only possible during an emergency, which is the ability to completely punish and destroy the careers and lives of physicians. Mm-hmm. They've now made it permanent.
Yep.
That's what they've done. And if you're in BC and if you are a patient down there, watch out. Yeah. Because the healthcare system is now your worst enemy.
Yeah. Well, if you think you have a doctor that's willing to stand up against the government, tell them to move somewhere else.
They're not going to last long.
No. Because they have very little hope of being protected by the government, especially if the government is out to get them.
Yep.
But the results of government coming out to get people come out in this story from the Counter Signal. Canadian taxpayers sent over $6 million to quarantine 15 people. Conservative MP Michelle Rempel discovered the Canadian taxpayers spent almost $7 million to quarantine just 15 people in one Calgary hotel.
Yep.
Garner's discovery came after she submitted order paper questions regarding specific quarantine hotels in Alberta. Move over $6,000 a night in London. I just found that Liberals spent over $450,000 per person on hotel stays in Calgary. On Monday, Garner received a response from Liberal MP Adam Van Coverden. Garner wrote in her Substack what she learned. In fiscal year 2022, long after the rest of the world had ended quarantine hotel restrictions and after the government had lifted travel restrictions, at one Calgary hotel, the federal Liberal government spent $6,790,717 on lodging expenses for 15 people.
Wow.
So this is, of course, insane.
Mm-hmm.
It costs about $450,000 more per person than what the Fed said it would. CTV reported 2 years ago that the per-person price was about $1,500. She mentioned the expense came after the federal government lifted its quarantine requirement. The response to my in-order paper question states that the federal government would cancel the contract after giving 30-day notice, but only elected to do so sometime in late fall 2022, again, long after travel restrictions had been eased.
And I always laugh when I think, like, Trudeau has the gall to accuse Pierre Poilievre of, like, being bad with money.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, sure, buddy.
Yeah.
You
You say that. Come on, man.
Mr. Like, throwing money to the wind and, like, like, nothing matters financially.
Yeah. Biden. Come on, man.
Come on, man. Not a joke. Not a joke.
Not a joke. Well,
Uh,
to Trudeau, it is a joke. And that's part of the unfortunate part of why our country is such a joke.
yeah.
But,
Speaking of jokes.
yeah, speaking of jokes, we're going to have the final section of the show to compare two different reports. So the first one is from Sky News Australia. Unvaccinated COVID patients at greater risk of death from at least 18 months after infection.
Oh.
Research took place in 2020. It only takes into account people who had not been vaccinated at the time they were infected, but because of the sheer number of people who fell ill in the first wave, the others say it can still help evaluate future outbreaks. The findings come following a study of more than 160,000 people during the first year before any jabs were available. Those who caught the disease between March and November 2020 were found to be up to 81 times more likely to die within the first 3 weeks of infection. They remained up to 5 times more likely to die than uninfected people a year and a half later. Patients also had higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease, again up to 18 months after infection, which researchers say forms part of long COVID. BS!
Funny, all these claims, right? Like,
This included coronary heart disease, heart failure, and deep vein thrombosis. They say their findings indicate that COVID patients should be monitored for at least a year after recovery.
By the way, I remember listening to a doctor, Dr. Ryan Cole, who's a major player in, like a lot of the whistleblower complaints from doctors, and he was saying that yes, COVID does target the lungs, which is what its number one target is. But he was basically saying that, like, the whole idea that they're trying to, like, put, like, cardiovascular, particularly, like like heart issues and all that kind of stuff on COVID, is wildly overblown, because COVID does not go after your heart. It goes primarily after your lungs. This whole thing of, like, tying it to long COVID is obfuscating. So here's the claim. They're claiming that, if you're unvaccinated, you have a massive, giant, chance of dying after, like, if you don't get the vaccine. This is part of their strategy of scaring the crap out of people. Remember, like, during what was it, like the winter of 2021, 2022, they were saying, like, those who are unvaccinated are in for a winter of death, or like some crazy, like, fear-mongering thing, right? Funny how that didn't materialize. Funny how people were not dropping like that, like, like crazy on the streets. Well, there was a new thing that came out recently that I didn't hear about until today. I was doing my research. I'm like, how about that? And that story, I just found it on Not to Be. I'm sure it's in a lot of different places, but that story did come up on Not to Be. If you want to go there, Stephen, let's take it on.
So, report, COVID deaths in Canada nearly doubled in 2022, and I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to say why I think it happened.
Yeah.
Hello, my fellow conspiracy theorists. Glad to see you're all still alive somehow. I've come here to tell you about an interesting phenomenon happening in Canada where COVID deaths are on the rise, despite the country that's 85% jibby-jabbed.
Which he always brags about.
Yep. So this is interesting. Why would COVID deaths in a country where 85% of the citizens are protected by the latest and greatest vaccine, fighting off a less deadly version of the virus, see such an increase in COVID deaths? So in 2020, the total deaths reported to the Public Health Agency of Canada by provinces and territories was 9,225. In 2022, as jibby jabs became accessible, Between January and July, COVID deaths didn't decrease over the year. Instead, the figure slightly increased to 9,934. In 2022, with an approximately 85 JB jab population in January with less deadly COVID variant dominant, COVID deaths increased again. Oh, whoops, accidentally scrolled up. So in 2022, Health Canada data shows that 15,844 deaths occurred due to COVID, almost double the number of deaths in 2020 where citizens were unprotected.
Isn't that funny? You know, like you throw out these like, you know, magical, beautiful, like, you know, unimpeachable, like, you know, like jibby jabs.
Yeah.
And somehow we doubled the death rates.
Yeah, seriously, is this only a topic for conspiracy theorists still, or are we finally going to admit there's something that's just not right with these jibby jabs, government reporting, and consequences of lockdowns, or all the above? Yes. Mm-hmm. I know the mainstream media, I know YouTube being censorious bastards won't let us talk about it, but there's something wrong in Denmark.
Picture.
In Canada.
Yeah.
I say Denmark because, of course, that's the famous reference.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But something smells in Canada, and of course our government is trying to find ways, such as Bill C-11 and other ways of online censorship, to cover up the ability of the citizens to rise up and to publicly say anything about it. Like, it's a very good thing that this information is available. But saying, oh yes, like these 15,000 deaths, they happened from COVID. I don't believe that for a single gosh darn second.
Yeah.
These people did not die of COVID.
Yeah. Look at the last part of that thing. He pulled out something else. The excess deaths and the actual pace that they're setting.
Yeah.
So
excess deaths is the okay. So I'm gonna go back to the stories. Excess deaths is the term that indicates whether a region had more or fewer deaths than expected, giving demographics and historical trends. Yeah. It helps calculate the true impact of things. Oh. Scrolling because my mouse wheel is broken.
Can I get a new mouse wheel, man?
Yeah, I need a new mouse.
Yes, gotta get a new mouse.
Figure helps calculate the true impact of a health crisis. Health Canada data indicates 13,940 excess deaths took place in 2022, up to August 27th. In 2021, the total excess period deaths over the same period was 10,406. In 2020, it was 8,057. In other words, the percentage of Canadians vaccinated against COVID increased, so did the excess death total and the COVID deaths.
Isn't that massive? Like,
don't be suspicious. Don't be
mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Something's wrong. Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Oh my gosh, that would actually be hilarious TikTok. Just like slowly scrolling. It's like, don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. That'd be so funny.
It's right there. It's right in front of you. Like the idea that, like, and by the way, like our illustrious prime minister continues even today to talk about how, you know, like, we saved everyone with our magical, like, you know, like
jibby jab campaign.
And it's like, it's a complete lie. It's such a complete lie.
I am so full of BS.
That's right. Come, I will shovel it, you know, towards you.
I will shovel it through the government media propaganda campaigns.
Oh, thank you, dear leader. Thank you, fearless leader.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's at this point, it's so difficult to deny. But it's just, yeah, it just becomes incredibly insane. This is part of the reason why that Bill C-36 is so insane. Because one of the reasons why they put that thing in place is because they don't want any doctor anywhere in BC to criticize the almighty sacred, like, jibby jab. Meanwhile, the jibby jab, based on evidence from all over the world and loads of high credential, very serious, very top-notch doctors are all basically saying, you need to stop these things now. Like, literally, period. Like, no, stop the rollout immediately, because these things, the safety signals, the danger, the red flags, the warning signs are exploding. And these politicians are literally, like, they've sold their souls to the devil. This is why they hold on to it. So it's, at this point, I mean, it should be pretty obvious. Nobody should be putting this crap in their in your body. Nobody.
Nobody.
You know, because we know that every additional one that you get is like literally like playing a giant game of Russian roulette.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I had speaking earlier in our conversation before the show, we were talking about Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And talking with people, and it's just like, there are so many people on Twitter that are like, yes, we should have, like, in order to make sure that we finished off COVID once and for all and had a zero COVID policy, the unvaccinated should have been arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And forcibly vaccinated. And anyone that does not vaccinate every 6 months should be forcibly arrested and vaccinated. I'm like, my goodness, you guys are evil. And they're like, we have to do this for public safety and public health. And I'm like, for a virus that is less deadly than the flu.
The greater good.
And they're like, it's not less deadly than the flu. And I'm like, yes, it is. It's been approximately the same since 2020. And then, of course, since Omicron comes out, it's been less deadly than the flu. And we haven't been allowed any proper ways to treat it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a greater good answer for that. At least,
no,
it's the only greater good is for the big pharma companies because they can't make any money from it.
Of course, the problem is that if obviously I'm appealing to that movie Hot Fuzz, because remember the whole confrontation between Sergeant Angel and the council is like everything they were saying was so patently
insane. Yeah.
Patently insane. They're like, well, they deserve to die because she had an annoying laugh. It's like, that's why you killed her. It's like, well, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's just an atrocious house. Like, it's absurd.
It didn't fit with the rustic motif. So you killed him for that? For the greater good.
What about like, cousin, like your cousin, whatever her name was.
Yeah.
It was like,
she was an unfortunate accident, but an unfortunate occurrence. But
we can't have her. No one can. Like the greater good.
Oh yeah, she was moving away. If you can't have her, nobody can. It's like,
yeah, I know they're like literally insane.
What?
But that movie, that scene, it's so reminiscent of now.
Oh yeah, right now it's very clear that this is how modern society treats the evils that it's perpetuating. It's like, oh, well, we froze the bank accounts of those who disagreed. Yep. It's like, but we had to because it was a public health emergency. Yep. It's like, no, you didn't. The greater good. That's not an excuse for evil.
But the funny thing is that for like the longest time, people like the left, the lunatic left, has basically thrown around the name Nazi, like on in totally absurd.
National Socialist.
That's just anybody to them was a Nazi. I don't like your opinion, hence you're a Nazi. Like, right? But in this case, it actually fits for them because they're advocating the very same things that were done under that incredibly difficult period of history. They're actually advocating for locking people up because they're dissenters. It's insane. Like, it literally is like talking to somebody who is brainwashed. That's what it feels like. You're like snapping your fingers in front of their face, and they're like, and they got like slobber coming out the side of their mouth, and like, the greater good. It's like NPC. It's crazy. Which is why it's always like so insane talking to people on Twitter, talking to people on Facebook. You really believe that people in this world have literally lost their minds. Case in point, did you see that conversation between Michael Knowles and that abortion activists?
From a long time ago?
No, it was a recent one. One that he was basically sitting across from her. She pulled out this picture of an aborted baby, like a baby at like 9 weeks, and she's like, "You see, clearly, obviously, this is like not really a baby because it doesn't look like one." It's like, well, wait, what is that? It's like, oh, it's an aborted baby. It's like, wait, you're saying that's basically like the remains of a decapitated like.
Oh yeah, I remember
baby?
That. That was a while ago.
Was that a while ago? I just saw it recently.
That was like months ago.
I didn't know that. I just saw it recently. But yes, ultimately they're a bunch of liars. They believe nonsense, and they completely and totally they believe absurdities. It's a crazy world that we live in.
That was a month ago.
Was that a month ago?
Yep. Bronte Remsick. Yep.
Yeah.
Month ago.
Yeah.
It was a decent one.
Yeah.
But Michael Knowles is I will say this about him. Michael Knowles is a better debater on other issues.
Yes.
Like, he's fantastic on climate change. He's fantastic on issues like the more questionable subjects. But about abortion, I'm just like,
he's a little too soft.
Yeah, he's too soft, and he doesn't. Like, Lila Rose is probably the best public debater in terms of abortion.
I'd say Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro is
He's solid.
Is really good. He just doesn't get into a lot of like long form abortion debates.
Yeah,
like most of the stuff that he gets involved in as far as abortion will be like conversations that he has with students at conferences, and he'll smack them down hard.
But he's also he's no nonsense.
Yes, he is.
That's my favorite thing. He's all like bam, bam, bam. Like, like a lot of the talking points he makes. Even Lila Rose tends to be a little bit too.
She'll let them say what they say.
Yeah.
And then she'll like circle back and then come back for the smackdown.
Yeah. My issue here is, okay, this is like what you and I have talked about in the past. The problem with dealing with these people is that you treat them like they're acting in good faith when they're not. Mm-hmm. And so this is why I appreciate what Ben Shapiro said, that you have to go after their high horse. Because what they want is they're going to say all sorts of like absolutely absurd and morally reprehensible things and get away with it because you're trying to be civil. And I'm like, no, you should not be being civil with these people, because what they're actually advocating is purely reprehensible, and they're getting away with it. And unfortunately, you have to go after these people, because these people, their whole shtick is they have to like talk about how they're the moral ones and we're the immoral ones. And that's not the way it is. It's the opposite. They're the immoral ones, and you have to expose them for the morally depraved frauds that they are. You have to point that out, because otherwise they keep their legitimacy. That's the problem with the whole debate, is that we're letting them off the hook way too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Way too much, yeah.
Oh, yeah, like, there are definitely times when you just need to be like, nope, abortion is not healthcare, abortion is genocide, and there's nothing you can do that will alter that truth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if they leave, because they're like, well, that's ridiculous. And it's like, well, people said the same thing about when they called the Holocaust genocide. Mm-hmm. Because they treated these people groups in the exact same way.
Yeah, and you're like, it's not true. You're using dehumanizing fetus instead of a human being.
Mm-hmm.
You're calling it healthcare instead of like an abortion procedure.
Yep.
Why? Because you need to change it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really hope that we have the chance to go to another like pro-choice rally and just be like, okay, let's do this.
Let's talk, people.
Yeah. But anyways, that's going to be where we end the show for tonight. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're following on our video platforms such as BitChute, YouTube, and Rumble, then like, share, comment, subscribe. Check out our other videos and see how we feel about other subjects. And of course, if you like what you see, then send us a positive message. If you want to leave some feedback for us, which is more personal, then you can check out our email address via theshrewddudes.com.
You can also send us a message by Twitter, the Twitter app. Also, send us a message on Facebook on the Shrewd Dudes page. Yeah. We'll get those.
Well, like that's what I was going to address next. If you're following us on our text platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Gitter, and Parler, then comment, like, tweet, parlay, all of the above. I read and check it out fairly regularly. At least I check out regularly on Gitter, Twitter, and Facebook. Mm-hmm. I don't have an app for Parler because they haven't brought Parler back to the App Store. So I don't have notifications for that. But I will get notifications if you post or if you send us a message on either of those platforms. So if you have something to say, if you want to join us in the show for a special, I've actually had some offers. So for other shows, if we do a special on if there's some big topic, then we might have some other guests come on and we'll have an interesting kind of not across the aisle section, but just talking about everyday things. And maybe the end of 1 month, it'll be like, let's just have an open round table like we used to and just discuss stuff, because we haven't had a chance to really do that now that we do live streams every week. So we'll see how that goes. There's lots of things we can do, and we still have things that we're trying to plan for the future. So everything is up in the air. We'll kind of play it by ear.
Yeah.
So that being said, we will see you Thursday for a regularly scheduled live stream. Until then, if you have a great night, we like to remind you, why be rude? Yes?
I was going to say, remember, just a quick reminder, on Thursday, we're not on Twitch.
Yes. We're only streaming on YouTube and Facebook because, once again, Twitch decided that if you say pedophile should be executed, you should not be on Twitch. So, and that's a no-no, saying that pedophiles should be executed for pimping out little boys. So, I thought that was okay, apparently.
I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we will be live streaming on YouTube and on Facebook. We will see you there at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time. As I was saying before, we like to remind you, why be rude when you can be shrewd? We'll see you then. Have a great night. And as always, God bless.
Good night, everybody.